Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I have Ed Stevenson here, author of the poem Kneeling from issue 136. Ed, thank you so much for joining us for writing for Fountain Magazine.
It's good to be with you today.
So your submission is a poem titled Kneeling, and it's not like an in-depth piece like a lot of the articles are. It's very heartfelt. So I would like to ask about what the significance of kneeling is to you to whatever it really means.
Well, the issue came up in regard to professional athletes kneeling in relation to the games, and I was raised a United Methodist Christian, and whenever we would have what we call communion, we'd go to an altar and kneel, and so kneeling was a very respectful kind of thing. And the professional athletes were taking a lot of criticism for doing that, and they're saying that kneeling was not respectful to the flag or to veterans. And from my heritage, it's just the opposite. It's most respectful. And I would say that in some ways it's akin to what I've seen and experienced in my trips to Turkey, and particularly with Turkish friends who I've gone to prayers with them and in a number of different kinds of occasions. And one of the things that impressed me about that experience too was the sense of, I'm not sure an outsider can ever judge whether somebody else is praying, but it sure looked sincere and genuine. And so that posture of prostrating yourself or making yourself physically vulnerable, that's how we submit to God in one sense. So that's the whole notion behind the poem, that kneeling is a way of submitting to God in all kinds of circumstances. I notice even politicians, when they're working a crowd and there are children present, they kneel. They come down to try to get the connection in that way. So it's a kind of a way of talking about a humble and respectful approach to another person or to an issue. So that's where my thinking was that originated the poem. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, humility, you touched on humility a lot in the poem. And that seems to be like the crux of why it's important to you, the significance. Do you want to expand on maybe like why this humility is important, why specifically
Sure.
Kneeling is a great way to show this humility?
Well, one of the things that I think is pretty obvious and troubling about American culture is that there's not humility is not a virtue, or is not a personal attribute that is really celebrated in our American culture. And I think it's a primary virtue in that you have to, humility means seeing that you're not the only thing in the universe and not the primary thing in the universe. And so you can't really connect with other people, even with nature. We're out here in a gorgeous area in Montana near the mountains, and you could just ignore those if you were really self-focused. But to really take them in, you have to kind of step back from your own ego and see what's there. And I think that's true even more significantly in human relationships. If we're full of ourselves, we can't really connect. And particularly that's true, I think, in families. If we really want to connect with a child of ours, if we really want to connect with a spouse, if we really want to connect with parents, we have to be willing to pay attention to something other than our own ego. So yeah, I think, and one of the things that really, I've been to Turkey 2, 3, 4 times, I don't know, but one of the things that really got to me is particularly with young men about your age.
Mm.
Uh, uh, they weren't cocky and they weren't kind of flexing their muscles all the time, and that humility means it's easier to have a conversation. It's a start. It's a start. It's not the whole conversation, but without that, you can't start the conversation. I think that's true with people, and I think that's true ultimately with God. If we're full of ourselves, we can't connect very well with God. Uh,
I agree. I agree with those points that I think humility really allows you to be more open and to accept. I mean, because otherwise, like you said, if arrogance, closed mindedness really does uh, put the focus on yourself, and if you're focused on yourself, then it's like you have blinders on, really.
yeah,
So that's all very important. I guess then for our last question, we can maybe end with. I mean, it's indirectly covered, but I mean, what does this poem really mean to you?
well, uh, it's in many senses a plea uh, for humility. It's most, I think, most poetry or all poetry is asking people to look at things a little differently than they might otherwise. And so, particularly in our culture, since humility is ignored a lot, um, the poem is asking people to read this and kind of take a different look at something they might not see otherwise, something they might not see in a different way. The poet W.H. Auden says that a poem is an attempt to express to the public something that you've seen or heard that was really important to you. And that's what I think it is in part. An attempt to share something that has been important to me and hope might be important to some other people.
So it's essentially a call to embrace and think about humility.
Yes, it is. It is. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ed, for joining us.
Well, thank you. I enjoy doing this. I enjoy meeting you. And I have a fairly long and very blessed uh, connection with some people in the movement. And their friendship and their generosity to me is very moving and important part of my life.